Hey guys, Lenny Reed, Dynomite Diesel Products. We're going to go over some P-pump stuff today, specifically governor spring stuff. With recent popularity of the P-pumps, the VP44 trucks, a lot of guys are starting to modify these things again, and they just never seem to die. So most durable pump on the planet, oil fed, oil cooled, oil lubricated, keep your engine oil changed. This thing will live forever. They seem to just not die. Now, governor springs, we've got two different sets of governor springs. In this hand, I hold our Comp GSK Comp governor spring kit. And basically what that comes with is an extremely stiff, basically it's a valve spring damn near, and we've got a brand new idle spring. And the reason for that is because the idle spring kind of matches the stiffness of this. So we do give you a shot peen. These are made in America. They're actually made in Idaho. We've got a company manufacturing for us. Coils go opposite directions as like they're supposed to. The shot peen, American made, good stuff. Not cheap, but good. Comp GSKs are going to be for the guys that have a good pump with a good fast rate cam, at least like a 215 style cam or some quick rate cam. If you don't have enough camshaft in the pump to keep up the governor springs, it's still not going to want to cover over like 5,000 to 5,400 RPM. So you're not going to get all the potential out of the governor spring. Just keep that in mind. If you put a set of Comp governor springs in a 160 or 175 pump, you don't have a lot of fill time. You're not going to get all the power and all the fuel upstairs. It won't be the governor that's holding you back. That'll be the injection pump holding it back. Another alternative is going to be the 3/4K. Now 3/4Ks, we use your existing idle spring. The idle spring is the large diameter one. You would continue to use that out of your pump, just like such. With the 3/4K kit, you'll notice that we have one seat, one spring, two spring, three spring. The very smallest spring, shortest and smallest in diameter, is the one that converts it from a 3,000 RPM spring to a 4,000 RPM spring. If you do not use this, it's okay. You use this, set it on the seat with your factory idle spring. That is a 3,000 RPM kit. Install this, now you have a 4,000 RPM kit. Again, if you have a camshaft out of 160 or 175, you may not get full fuel to 4,000 RPM. It won't be the governor springs that are your problem. It's the camshaft and the fill time of the camshaft not allowing you enough fuel in there to get it to spin up that high and make a bunch of power upstairs. So what are we going to use for tools? To cheat and make this a little bit faster, I have taken liberty of kind of breaking some things free using tools out of the toolbox, and I wanted to show you something that's fairly easy and fairly important. We got some snap ring pliers. I have a custom tool for doing this that I made out of a big screwdriver. I basically ground out the screwdriver, and when you go inside this lock, you can reach in there with some like needle nose pliers or snap ring pliers. Turn that, you're gonna feel it click. Each one of those clicks, there's gonna be a really, really soft click. There's gonna be a firm click followed by more firm clicks. It's extremely critical that you count the clicks as you're tearing your factory stuff apart, or the other springs that you're pulling out. Count the clicks. You want to know that instantly, so when you're going to assemble it again, that's going to be kind of a barometer to help you get the truck starting and running correctly again. So once you've got it broke free with this and it's pretty smooth, sometimes it's easier just to grab a regular screwdriver. You can stick it on one side, rotate that around, and as you get it to come around, get it to a point where you can reach in with your fingernails, get it out. Another really inexpensive tool that's critical for this job, just a pencil magnet. Extendable, like $3, your local, parts house. You're gonna pull that out. You'll notice that has a cam profile to it, and as I say click, it's actually rotating up and over some detents, and that's where the clicks are coming in. So do not lose this, do not drop this. You're going to use this again. Now we've got the outside retainer of the springs. We're going to fish that out. You'll see that that's got 1, 2, 3 steps. Extremely important, do not lose that. I'm going to use my old man glasses. And truthfully, like, the only reason that I know anything about this pump is because I'm really old. Back when I was young, we didn't have EFI Live or head studs. We had P pumps and 0 plates and lots of tricks to try and make this thing pump a lot of fuel. So now I'm going to fish this stuff out. I'd like to start with the inner springs first because it's safest. This pump has already been modified by somebody, maybe me, I don't know. It's got one of our 4K springs in it. So we've got all the springs, inner spring. We got a combination of 3 springs, not gonna lose that. Next, I'm gonna reach in with the magnet. I'm gonna fish out the idle spring. Now, down inside, there's kind of a, I don't know if it's aluminum or a magnesium barrel. Yeah, this is definitely one of our 4K governor spring kits. It's got our seat in it. Springs all sit, and you'll notice they're staggered height. Basically what happens is as the governor starts to swing this direction, it starts to compress that at different stages, and that's how you get your fuel curve. Now down inside, we're gonna fish out some shims. So I've got 2 shims right here. These shims are the idle spring shims. Bosch has these in 2 different part numbers. One is 0.30 thickness, one is 0.50 thickness. You'll want to measure these, and when you measure them, you're going to want to make sure that you've got the exact same thickness of shim stack on both sides of the governor. You got 2 sets of springs. That's because you've got 2 halves of this governor. So basically I would throw like a $10 vernier caliper at this and measure these to see that my stack is going to be the exact same on the other side. So idle spring shims right there. We'll have those things in stock. You don't always need to replace them, but if you install a set of governor springs and you can't get it to work correctly and it doesn't respond correctly, you turn the defrost or the air conditioning on, or you hit the power steering and the motor surges and does funky stuff, or you have to rest your toe on the gas pedal to get it to start up and you don't want to do that. Basically, guide sleeve travel is a critical measurement, and it's very unfortunate that you can't do it in the truck. But in the backyard, we're going to go through this and show you how to adjust all of it. These shims may be required for your truck. I just don't know that, otherwise I would include them in the kit. Again, if you've got 1 shim, 2 shim, 3 shims, be sure you measure them to see what thickness they are, and they match the other side of the governor. Now, inside the injection pump, customer called me this morning, says that he tore a pump apart and it did not have this inside of it, which is extremely odd to me because basically this is a hardened steel wear plate. Inside the housing, it's softer, and as these springs cycle against the pump housing, you don't want to wear that housing out. So please, if you see this, this is the first thing you go to put back in. So step 1, wear plate reinstallation, down in. Take your little pencil magnet without the magnet side, make sure it's sitting flat. I've never had a problem with that, but be sure that that's not cockeyed or lifted on one side, because that's going to screw up the whole stack. Now, just for giggles, we're going to start with the 5K or the Comp GSK kit. We're going to reinstall our idle shims as they were before. This is so easy on the pump on the stand, but again, take the back of your pencil magnet. I can see I got them flat. Now I can stick my pinky down in there and I can tell that I've got them flat. Your brand new idle spring gonna go in the pump housing, no problem. Now we've got our Comp GSK. This spring is responsible for all of the RPM, basically off idle to wide open throttle. It's super stiff. Like I say, it's basically just a valve spring. On this spring, you'll notice that one side has not been opened up or tapered, and on the other side, we actually grind that out and we taper that, so it's gonna fit this outside collar. That'll allow the spring to fit level and flat and flush. If you try and run this thing backwards, the spring doesn't want to sit level. So that's going to cause a huge problem. So again, taper out to you, because this is going to go inside the taper. Drop the spring down inside. Outside retainer. That one thing I should show you. The retainer has a key to it, and it's only going to go on the stud one direction. So that is something to pay attention to, so you don't fight that. There we go. Now, my nut, start it by finger. Start it by finger. Start it by finger. In a second, I'll start it by finger. In the truck, over the fender, there's a lot less fun. Here, I'm struggling with it now. There we go. Okay, I've started it. It's not cross-threaded. Now I'm going to use my finger just to get that thing all the way down as far as I can without having to use tools. There, I just felt the softest click. I'm going to use my fingernails. There's one pretty good click. Now, at this point, I'm going to be down over the fender, reaching in. I'm going to use some sort of needle nose plier, spring like circlip plier, whatever you got in your toolbox, you can make something happen. If you want to grind a really fat screwdriver, I'll show you kind of a diagram how we notch that out. Now, we've already got one soft click. I felt one fairly firm. Two, three, four. Now, I can catch my finger on the top of the stud, but not under a thread. And that's important for me to know right now, because inside, when this is in the motor, at this point you're gonna have a tool on the front of the cam of the injection pump. You're gonna rotate it over 180 degrees. You're gonna repeat process on the other side. You wanna know that when you're reaching down in there, you can shove a vernier caliper down there. It's extremely difficult to get a good accurate measurement on it. So, but if I go in another click or two, I'm going to start to feel thread underneath my fingernails. So at this point, I can actually catch a thread with my fingernail, and I know I've just counted mentally 5 clicks in. Your truck, your injection pump, your shim stack is not the same as your buddy's or my truck. No two pickups that I've ever worked on ever end up being the same. And if you've got a truck or a motorhome that's never acted right from the factory, the reason why I say it's important to measure that shim stack is because, like, at the factory, you've got guys that are throwing these things together as fast as they can, and if they calibrate pretty good, then it's going to be shipped down the road. You get it in the motorhome, you get it in the pickup truck, and it doesn't work quite correctly. Back at Dodge, when these things were brand new, you didn't have guys that were trained on P-pump stuff, so they would troubleshoot it, and basically if Dodge would allow them to replace the injection pump on your truck, you might get a whole new pump for one shim that was incorrectly stacked compared to the other shims. But now that you've got a truck that's outside of warranty by 2 decades, you need to fix it, so pay attention. Now, at this point, I'm going to go ahead, tear my comp governor springs out. We're going to shut the cameras off for just a brief moment, or we'll fast forward at one or the other. And then we're going to go into the installation of a 3/4K kit, and we'll talk about that as it goes together. Cam style lock nut, outside retaining washer. We got governor spring, idle spring. Again, we got 2 idle spring shims. We've got 1 wear plate. So these springs are a little bit different. And since I've got 3/4K kit in there, I might as well just show you how to reinstall that 3/4K kit instead of getting my dirty one or my clean one dirty. So when you pull out factory parts, you'll have seen that there's actually two pieces that act as the factory seat and of course the factory springs. You're gonna leave all that stuff out. When you go to install one of our 3/4K kits, you're gonna have step one, wear plate installation. Dunk. I can tell that that went flat. Double check it one more time. Actually, it wasn't flat. Then I've got two of my idle shims. Those things worry me a bit. Shove down, make sure she's flat. She's flat, we're good. Now, 3/4K kit comes with its own stepped seat. You'll notice that these things are exactly the same dimension on both sides, and we've made these the exact same dimension for 15 years probably. So be sure you use that seat with our springs. Now, like again, we've got 3 springs: large, medium, small. I'm gonna go in with the large one first. Actually, to be honest, first thing I'm gonna do is reinstall the idle spring. And the reason for that is because I've got those idle spring shims down inside there. I know they're set flat. I don't want to disturb that. So first, step one, idle spring. We've got step 2 going to be our large diameter out of our 3/4K kit. Dunk. Medium diameter. Now at this point, if I start the reassembly process by using the retainer and my cam nut, that would be a 3,000 RPM governor spring kit. And depending on your truck, the injectors you have, the fuel plate you have, the timing you have, and the turbocharger you have, you may be able to support 3,000 RPM worth of full fuel. But the way this is set, it should give you very close to 3,000 RPM before fuel starts to do like a hard cutoff. Now, if you've got enough camshaft in your pump, you have enough injector and you have enough turbo that you can actually burn fuel and make horsepower up to 4,000 RPM, at that point, you're gonna wanna install a very small spring. That's gonna give you a little bit more spring tension. It's gonna keep that governor tighter, longer, before centrifugal force overcomes it. And at that point, again, you need turbocharger, you need fuel supply, you need enough injector to make any horsepower up there. It'll free spin up there, but that doesn't mean it's gonna make horsepower now. So going together with a 4K kit, here we go. We've got our outside retaining nut. Lock, stock, barrel. We're gonna go in with our little cam nut. Started for me this time easy. Now, these springs are not near as stiff as the Comp GSKs that I just took out. So very quiet, pay attention. I just felt the first soft click. There's a second. Third click was really firm. Fourth click, nice sharp pop. This is a good spot to start. I don't know this injection pump, don't know what pickup truck it was on last. Like I say, your truck just ran, and if it started and ran fine, whatever click you had, go back together with what you tore your truck apart, because the idle spring is the most critical thing to startup. We can adjust the rest of it later, but if you had 4 clicks, if you had 2 clicks, if you had 5 clicks, start right there. Now, what happens if you put governor springs in and it doesn't really want to start very good? You've got to rest your toe on the gas pedal in order to get it to start. Well, basically what's happening is you probably have too much tension on that outside spring, so you'd want to back off both sides of the governor, 1 click each. And if it starts noticeably better, then I'm going to pick a for instance. You had 4 clicks in, you're now 3 clicks in because you just backed 1 off. It's okay, go to 2. Does it start perfect? Fantastic, drive it. What happens if you turn the air conditioning on and the governor doesn't respond quite correctly? Well, that's another issue that governor spring adjustments can cause. And without measuring guide sleeve travel and following a spec on the pump stand, it's very difficult to get that correct. So now that you've got the governor springs in, it starts really well, you're happy with that, turn the air conditioning on. Does the governor bounce all over and does it take a minute for it to recover? At that point, that's a whole nother issue that's going to be responsible by that outside spring. Now this is where, if it starts good, it shouldn't really do that, but these trucks are all getting old. Your truck may have 300,000 or 400,000 miles on it. The idle spring itself, we can sell you a fresh idle spring kit because these springs won't last forever. And if you've got 300,000 or 400,000 miles on there, you may want to sign up and get a new set of springs. But those idle spring shims could also be your only issue, and you may need just a little bit more shim. Like, let's just say you've got two 0.30 millimeter shims in your pump. You might want to do like a 0.3 and a 0.5, just add a little bit more spring pressure to that spring, or just a fresh spring. If you buy more, you're in Indiana and we're in Idaho, no big deal. Buy more parts than you need. You can always return them. Just bring them back within 30 days. Keep them clean. Don't get them all screwed up. Don't bend them. Don't break them and expect us to return them. But I'd rather that you bought more shims than you needed. When you get your truck calibrated, you can always send the stuff back you don't need. So again, fresh springs might be the culprit. Not having the correct amount of spring pressure, because now you've got a fresh set of springs as your governor springs. Now that those are fresh and tight, you might be, the pressure differential between idle and governors are just going to be to the point where you can't really get it to calibrate. But those idle shims are going to be how you calibrate that. Now, another example of a problem would be, hey, look, I put the springs in and my truck doesn't even go to 800 anymore. It goes straight to 12 or 1300 RPM. You've got way too much spring pressure on that. So what you need to do is start backing the clicks off. So if you used to have 5 clicks and now it goes straight to 12 or 1300 RPM, or if it idles at 800 really well, but you start to give it gas and it's 800, 900, 1000, and it just overshoots from 1000 to 1300, you've got to back the governor off. If it's lethargic and it won't respond, then you've got to add clicks to it. So that measurement is called guide sleeve travel, and it's very difficult to get correct in the hood, under the hood. 60 minutes is about what it takes for the average guy to install a set of governor springs, but I've spent 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 hours under the hood trying to get them to run correctly. And sometimes the pumps just don't want to respond well, and you've got to send that into a pump shop to have them install governor springs and get the guide sleeve travel correct. I've had arguments with people in the past because the guys in the pump shop industry, they don't love aftermarket parts, and they just get it to where they start and they run, but they always have to rest their toe on the gas pedal in order to get the thing to run correctly. That's not actually the way it has to be. You should, I've got one truck with remote start. I push remote start when it's 12 degrees outside. It starts without my toe being in the truck and it runs in the driveway, no problem. This can be set to where it starts better than it ever did from the factory. Might take you some time, but you can get it there, I promise. So at this point, we should talk about what it took us to get to this point. Again, some sort of a way, I use a bolt with a 19 millimeter jam nut welded to a pump nut, and I run that directly onto the nose of this cam. I take my 2 wrenches and I jam it so my bolt head is nosed into the cam, and I have direct control over the camshaft without messing up the cam. You can probably buy a tool like that on eBay. It's just something I made out of stuff that I had laying around the shop, basically. Like I say, it was an old pump nut and a smaller nut, 3/4 inch nut and a 3/4 inch bolt, no big deal. All right, guys, so going back together, now that you've played with your springs, now that you've got it to where it runs pretty correct, you're probably pretty frustrated, or you got really lucky, either way. But like I say, this 3/4 inch plug, when you first pull this out, you're gonna see the oil's gonna spill down the injection pump. It's probably gonna land on the shop floor, so protect yourself by throwing a tray under there. If it's not your garage, you definitely wanna throw a tray under there, because the other guy that owns the garage probably doesn't want you to come back if you mess up his garage. Fuel shutoff lever is gonna be held on with I always use an 8 millimeter gear wrench, because as I'm kind of like down hovering over the fender and I'm working on it. I just want to get that on there one time, kind of hold my tongue just right. And I don't want to be taking this wrench on and off. So I use a gear wrench to break that little guy free. Once that's broken free, at that point, I'm going to be able to get behind, and I'll usually be able to just crack this by finger, wiggle it in and out, in and out, in and out, and then I get it to come off, no problem. So that is, you'll notice at this point, looking straight down in at this shaft, there's a Woodruff key. That Woodruff key is something that you cannot really operate this vehicle without, because the solenoid is electric and it's so fast that when it slams up and slams down without a Woodruff key, this will lose its time very, very quickly, probably the first cycle, and it won't run correct. So you're gonna wanna be damn sure that you do not lose the Woodruff key in this shaft. If you do, stop. You have to find that. If you do not find that, you have to call and you gotta get one. You might get lucky and find one at your local parts house or whatever, but I don't know how hard it's gonna be. I don't know how long it's gonna last. I don't even know if it's gonna be the right size. So please don't do that. You're gonna want an original Woodruff key right from the OEM. You're gonna want just a Bosch Woodruff key to fit in there. So it is really important that you don't lose that little sucker. Once you've got all your fuel linkage on, if you need to adjust the idle, in the very back of the injection pump, your leverage is gonna be right here. You're gonna be able to push that back. It's gonna throw this forward. And now this stud is responsible for setting the idle pressure, the idle. So going up is going to give you more RPM. Going down is going to take RPM away. On the bottom of that is another 10mm nut. To save yourself a lot of grief and a headache, right now you're going to see there's a bunch of black paint. You'll feel it. And that black paint, it goes flat and it gets beat up. So as you rotate that around even just a quarter of a turn, you're now going to be on fresh black paint that's never been beat up when that thing slams closed. 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 Ultimately, when you put this on brand new fresh black paint, say that 3 times. Fresh black paint, fresh black paint. I did it. Beers for after, but whatever, we'll get there. So if you rotate that around a quarter turn and it really raises like the idle speed up, I won't be surprised. So a good idea is to take just a small piece of sandpaper or a Scotch-Brite pad and kind of polish that down. Even though it's tough to get at, your results will be much more consistent. You're gonna wanna get some of that paint knocked off there with Scotch-Brite pad before you start playing with that. So now you're gonna have a 10mm wrench on that and you're gonna raise it to increase RPM. You're gonna drop it to decrease RPM. Once you finally get it to where somebody's in the cab of the truck and you're kind of like taking your breath as they're trying to start the truck, once you get it to where you're happy, the air conditioner reacts well, the idle speed is set correctly, it's not too high, it's not too low. You pull it into gear if it's an automatic truck and it idles around 750, 800 RPM. Once you're finally happy with all that, then you're gonna have a 10mm wrench on the top, 10mm wrench on the bottom, and you're gonna take the 10mm wrench, you're gonna cinch that up into the injection pump to make sure that that bolt does not ever move. If that bolt comes loose later on, you're driving 60 miles an hour down the freeway for an hour and that vibrates a turn up or a turn down, you come to a stop. If you're lucky, it stalls, falls on its face, and just you've got to, in order to keep it running, you've got to rest your toe on the gas pedal. If you're unlucky, it's going to idle at maybe 2,000, 2,200 RPM. It's going to scare you. It's going to scare you bad. And you're going to want to pop the thing into neutral, and you're going to figure out that that stud came loose and it's worked its way up. So when it returns back down to idle, it's not returning all the way to idle. It's holding you at fuel. So it's extremely important if you're going to adjust that idle screw that you pay attention to that and get that snug. So that concludes governor springs. Now, we're going to stay here this afternoon and we're going to go through more P-pump stuff. So there will be a series of P-pump stuff. You can start clicking, like, watch the next one. Probably going to be, I would say, 3 or 4 more videos on this. And we'll keep going today and keep working on this for you. Thanks, guys. Catch ya. Lenny Reed, Dynomite Diesel.